Greetings, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for another episode of Social Changers. This is our weekly video podcast highlighting social workers and change agents in the field, sponsored by our program ACTT, Social Change Warriors. And I'm Kathern Felton Paige. I'm the founder and director. So happy you could join us tonight. Whether you're here live with us or you found us on our YouTube channel, we're really grateful that you're joining us for our important conversation tonight. Just wanted to give you just a little quick background of our program. Waiting for my slide to activate. There we go. Agents of Change Training Team, Social Change Warriors. We go by ACTT, and we are a team of social workers with our master's degrees and our licensures in social work. We are working together for the purpose of sharing knowledge and facts and human interest stories that pertain to social change, social equality, justice, and problems in our nation that we're all facing today. And we're doing this by researching information for you, and we're putting out our information on our website via informational articles, video podcasts, webinars, and documentaries. So today we're having a video podcast, and I'm happy to say that the subject is one of interest, and I'm sure it's a subject that a lot of you possibly don't even think about on a daily basis. We're going to be talking today about the myth and what Betty has called this discussion today, Beyond the Myth, Black Women in America. And this is going to be a panel discussion between two amazing Black women, Betty Malloy, who has her MSW in social work from Southern California, USC, and Dr. Renee Campbell. I'm going to talk a little bit about their backgrounds here in a moment, and I'll be moderating as we go. So Ms. Malloy and Dr. Campbell are going to share detailed experiences with you of living in the U.S. as a Black woman, with some historical references kind of threaded throughout, as well as the importance of professional mental health therapy as a coping mechanism. And Betty wanted me to point out to you that actual experiences can vary based on factors including social status, hair texture, skin tone, etc. She also wanted me to point out that when she put together this deck, the accompanying deck for you today, that she chose green as a color for mental health. Gray is the color actually for mental illness, and blue is the color that points to the fact that when you are experiencing mental illness or mental health, you do feel very blue. It's the color that's used to describe depression in a lot of times. So I wanted to quickly go over both of their backgrounds with you so you have an idea of who you're going to be meeting today. First of all, I will tell you a little bit about Betty. Betty graduated from the University of Southern California, like I mentioned, from the Susan Dwork Peck School of Social Work. That is where I met Betty several years ago now. She has a concentration in social change and innovation, and she also holds her bachelor's degree in psychology from North Carolina Central University. I will keep this slide up for a moment so you can read along. She is currently the director of Cedar Creek Foundation Incorporated, a nonprofit targeting food scarcity, educational gaps, and homelessness in her rural community. So I've been honored, and it's been a pleasure for me to work with Betty. I was her field instructor when we were both with the Sishki Group, another great organization that you could look up on the web. They're doing great work. They are a hybrid organization, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to get to know Betty all these years and to work with her now. She is actually a member of our volunteer team. She's one of our social change warriors, and you're going to have a really good experience today as she guides you through this topic. Joining us today is our special guest, Dr. Renee Campbell. I'm super excited to have her with us today. Betty and I met Dr. Campbell when we were students at USC in the School of Social Work. Dr. Renee Campbell has been a professor at USC and at the University of Kentucky, and she has a very varied background. So I put it up here for all of you to take a look at. We will also have this on our website, socialchangewarriors.org. You can go to our website and read about the amazing background of both Betty and Dr. Campbell. She is a native of Kentucky, and we joke about that a little bit because I lived in Kentucky for a while and got to know the amazing people that live there, and the wonderful scenery that is part of her landscape there. And she speaks of her children, obviously very highly, like a lot of us do. And I love that she starts out her bios talking about her proudest accomplishment as being a mother. And many of us have that as well. She has participated in so many areas of education in the last 20 years. She has been the president and CEO of a human service organization. She's also an expert on family domestic violence, which I'll be working with her on another video podcast coming up soon on the intersection of domestic violence and homelessness. She doesn't know that yet, by the way, but she does now. And she's also been a director of one of the first transitional programs for housing in the United States. So I will let you read more about both their bios on our website, socialchangewarriors.org. And I'm very happy to bring them both up on the screen now so that you can meet them. And we're going to get our conversation started today. Betty, Dr. Renee, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on Social Changers today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I wanted to ask you, Betty, why this topic? Why this topic today? What made you choose to talk about the myth of that is the myth of the Black woman in America?
I actually came up with Beyond the Myth, as you mentioned, while doing the internship. We were given the assignment to talk about a subject matter that was near and dear to our hearts, and I immediately picked mental health and the Black woman with everything that surrounds her. And also, July is Minority Mental Health Month, so this can be a lead-in to that. So that's the reason to pick it.
Fantastic, Betty. Can you share with us a little bit how we got Dr. Renee involved in this video podcast tonight?
We got Dr. Renee because she actually did a dissertation called Black Women in America, Factors that Influence Success of African American Women. And that dovetails perfectly with Black women and how we present ourselves in America, not only outwardly to society, but inwardly to ourselves and to those closely around us.
Fantastic. I am going to turn my camera off for a while. When you guys need me or you have a question for me, just let me know, and I'm going to let you two start your discussion.
All right, Dr. Campbell, if you'd be so kind to start us off, and I'll jump in, and we can just go from there.
I think you're muted.
Thank you. Okay. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
good.
We can.
And so I was saying, thank you so much for mentioning my dissertation. I did that back in 1999. And the reason I did it is because there wasn't hardly any literature about African-American women. So I wanted to make a contribution to the literature. And so I started, doing my the research for my dissertation. And, throughout everything that I researched, there was talk about all these myths regarding African-American women. I mean, anything that I read, and like I said, there wasn't much information at all, but everything that I read talked about, these myths pertaining to African-American women. So, I think one of the questions is, can we say that we are our authentic self? And so I know, Betty, you and I talked about that quite a bit, and I've been thinking about it a lot since we talked about it. And I mean, who is our authentic self?
Yeah, and it's difficult to answer that question because we play so many roles. And it's not only the role of being a Black woman, but because we are Black women, then there are the other roles. You know, a lot of women are mothers. A lot of women are sisters, daughters, nieces. Some may be grandmothers. You're a worker, or you could be an entrepreneur, a business owner. You are, and then we have titles put on us that we don't know as we interact with people individually and society as a whole gives us roles that we may or may not. And somehow we cater to those roles, some for survival. And sometimes our catering is just, it's an unconscious way so that we can go through life. So do we really know who we are?
Yeah. And, you know, as you were talking about that, I was just thinking about, like, even in my childhood, you know, growing up in the 50s and 60s and growing up in a religious household and a household with values, you were taught how you were supposed to carry yourself as a person, but also as a Black person, also as a Black girl, also as a Black boy, a Black man. And so those things were taught to you as a means of making sure that you got to live. I don't see any, other way to say it. I mean, it was taught to you. And so, you know, growing up when I did in the 50s and 60s, when we didn't even have the right to vote, and your life was, I mean, you were at risk. You were at risk. So you had to be disciplined. So if you're living in a system like that, can you be authentic once you walk out that door as a child? Can you be authentic when you go to school? Can you be authentic when you are in middle school, high school? I mean, I don't know. I don't think that you can necessarily. So what do you think, Betty?
It also begs the question, can we even be authentic when we're in our homes? I was raised by older parents, and because of what they've been through, that kind of dictated, you talked about the rules that you were under as you were growing up. We had the same rules for, various reasons. Because, nowadays you hear about the talk. Well, every Black person has had the talk, gave the talk, heard the talk. But you also had the rules that went with the talk, and there's also that rule of being seen and not heard. And so as a child, your spirit can be quenched in your own home because you may be exuberant about something, and it could be the smallest things. And as a child, obviously, you don't know what your parents are going through or other adults in the house. But you are told, be quiet, be seen and not heard. And that becomes a part of you. I remember in school at NCCU learning about tabula rasa, and that we're born a clean slate, and then life writes itself upon our brain of who we are and how we think. And because of that, were we ever given the chance to be authentic?
Yeah.
And add to the fact, now we're Black women, and we are, the historical mammy. We're the Jezebel. We're the superwoman. We are the caretakers of everyone. We are the, we solve every problem. We're the ones that we can see, cut straight through to the heart of a matter. But then if we do, we're tactless, and we're not being respectful, and we're not taking our time. Although in for other people, being concise is a attribute. Right. Being aggressive is good.
Betty, I just wanted to comment off of what both you and Dr. Renee said. Growing up in the 60s and the 70s in Milwaukee with my family, the school that I attended, which was 53rd Street School, was pretty 50-50 racially. So I, in my opinion, had the advantage of not really, it was never like in my face. Racism wasn't in my face. I didn't understand it. My parents didn't really talk about it with me. They just accepted who my friends were. They had friends of color. I didn't really think about it. I was never educated what my friends were going through. That's what stuns me now today to hear you both talk about that. And even to this day, I don't think any of my Black African-American friends have ever told me that they were in fear, or that their parents gave them, as Betty said, the talk. I feel so naive in so many ways that I didn't know that and understand that as a child. I think the first time I ever really even saw racism was there was a boy in my class in the 4th grade who would always pick on my friend Randy, who was Black, but he also had a disability. And I remember always going to the teacher and saying, "That's not right. Why do you let this happen?" Bullying was just so accepted back then. It was almost like kids are just going to be kids, and nobody took care of it. And I was always appalled at that. But honest to God, I always thought it was from his disability. I didn't even know in the 4th grade. I didn't understand that these boys were probably in racist families, for all we know, right? So it makes me kind of mad in a way that society, my own parents and teachers, and didn't teach us about this, about what it's like to be Black in America. Why aren't we taught that?
I find that is because you don't think about what you don't go through. I noticed when you were talking, Kat, that you said two things, and you said Black and African American. And when you think about it, we are one of the only race that our identity, as far as society is concerned, has changed, has evolved. Most people are just Americans.
Right.
Most people are just, who they are. They know their background, they know their culture. And for the Black woman, when she looks at her history in this country, now everybody did not come here on a slave ship.
Right.
However, in a lot of ways, by definition of the term slave, a lot of Black women have been, whether they were freed or not, because even if they were freed back in the 1700s, the 1800s, there were still codes that they had to live by. Mm-hmm. So, and then women in general, especially in America, you haven't been able to do anything for yourself since until 1970 because you still needed a husband to be able to buy property, to have a credit card, et cetera, et cetera. So even with freedom and rights for women, Black women have been at the back of the bus.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel, Dr. Campbell?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I agree. And such a terrible history when you talk about enslaved, Africans. And when you were talking as far as, the values and the rules and things that we were taught in the home by our parents, I mean, that just extends to us as we became more mature and then became women. I was, when I did my dissertation, I interviewed Dr. Eleanor Love, and she was probably the first Black woman, probably faculty at the University of Louisville. And she talked about and she didn't use this word pressure, but it was pressure to make sure that she did everything right so that she would be an example. Because if she failed and didn't do her job, in an excellent way, that it would be bad for anybody that came after her, or maybe there wouldn't be anybody that came after her. And she talked about not having anybody to sit beside in the lunchroom. as a faculty member at all, but just carrying that, that you have to be the example. And so many African Americans, or many African Americans, have those kind of thoughts. And it's, it's really, it is burdensome, and it is extra weight to carry. And it does affect mental health. I think that for people that are not, African American or African American women, really would have no idea of that until they walked in an African American woman's shoes. Honestly, I think it would have to be an experiential exercise. Yeah. I've said many times that if there was a way to do some type of experiential exercise where white people in particular could change their color for a day. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just saw somebody post about shopping a Black woman, a professional, shopping while Black. Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's just change that for a day and have an experiential exercise, and then change you back. And let's talk about, okay, how was that for you? How did you feel? What happened?
Well, when you think about it, Black women, along with our Black men and our Black children, are really born with trauma. Studies have been shown how mothers experience trauma in the womb. Babies experience trauma in the womb through what their mothers are going through. It's, recent studies. And as we come into the world, everything, especially, and I'm saying especially in America because I live in America. It could be happening in other countries. I don't live there. But in America, you have to pretty much be on your P's and Q's all the time. Like you were talking about the doctor in at the University
of Louisville.
A moment ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of Louisville. Because you're always an example. We were example of our family. We carry our family name. Now, our family name may not originate from our actual family. Because, I'll take my own name, Malloy. Malloy's an Irish name. Last time I checked, don't think there's a lot of Black Irish people. Could be wrong. So, but we carry we carry the name of our family. So you need to be an example when you go out, because what was said in our community? Oh, that's so-and-so's child. They may not know your name, but they knew your people. And it's what we ask each other when we meet each other. Who are your people? Who do you come from? And if you aren't excellent, or at least if people don't know that you are doing your very best at whatever task you're doing, you are a bad example for that family. And you're bringing shame to that family. And, you get known as the black sheep, which is a whole nother topic, because why bad has to be Black, but that's a whole nother discussion. So the Black woman grows up. She may or may not have children. She may or may not have females, daughters, sons, the different ways she has to raise both, protect the husband or the male partner in the family. And it's really who's protecting her, because we get looked at for everything. It was mentioned in the intro, your hair. Everything we do and or say, I heard it said, is a political statement. So we have to be careful, or we have to be exact. So again, can we be authentic And a lot of times, especially now, I hear a lot of the younger people say, well, I can do what I want. I'm my own boss. I can say what I want to say, go where I want to go, be who I want to be. But at what cost? Because someone paid the price for you to be able to say that, and someone may pay the cost in the future because you were able to do and or say what you want.
Thank you, Betty and Dr. Renee. That was a really great conversation between the two of you. I just feel like I'm understanding and learning so much from both of you. Betty, tell our audience a little bit why this particular graphic spoke to you.
This particular graphic spoke to me when I thought about Black women in America and how we have to present ourselves to society. And the ideal that Black women have been taught, or that Black people have been taught, period, was to be as white as possible. And for the Black woman, obviously, being a white female is the ideal. And so when I saw this graphic with the mask coming off and the mask being a white woman over a Black face, it was exactly speaking to what I was trying to say.
Fantastic. Dr. Renee, any comments on that?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot. I mean, there's a way that we carry ourselves as Black women, and I'll speak for myself, in a professional setting. And so you're always, when you go out to work, when I go out to work, you put on your armor. And your armor is, you better speak correct English. You must have good posture. Your dress must be appropriate for the setting that you're in. And you better know how to be diplomatic. And if you do get angry, make sure that you don't communicate that in a way that comes off as anger, but make sure that you say it in a way that's acceptable to the powers that be or whoever you're around, that you have to, cater to, basically. So, and I don't necessarily, I guess because the powers that be are, for right now, white males,
yeah,
and females. And so that's where the power is. And so you're conducting yourself in a certain way. And then when you come home, then you hopefully get to take that armor off, because that armor is heavy. It's heavy.
Yeah.
And so you have to be, and so in saying that, I'll say that it's really important that the Black woman have an environment at home that is supportive and healthy.
Absolutely.
Because many Black women are coming home from being out in the field, being at war, and having their armor on to unhealthy situations. And
right.
that's another topic.
Right. Absolutely.
And again, I always say that if no other coping mechanism is helping, I am a therapy advocate. So I do advocate for therapy. As a matter of fact, that's my username on Twitter, therapy advocate, because it is important to use all tools at our disposal when we can.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, I'm not a Black woman, so I cannot relate to what you have both just stated about the armor and putting that on. But I do relate in a small way in that as a woman, we have to fight a lot harder, whether we're Black, white, purple, green, in society in general and in careers to climb up a ladder. You both know my former profession as a police officer. When I became a police officer, there were women on the force. There were women on other forces in the neighboring communities of mine, but we were still a big minority. Mm-hmm. And this was in the 90s. I became an officer in my mid-30s, and I went in pretty naive, thinking that I would just be accepted, and that wasn't the case at all. There were plenty of officers who did not want women as police officers. They didn't feel it was safe for them, was one of their main reasons. We don't believe it's safe for you. We don't believe it's safe for us, for you to be our partner. So I do understand a little bit about what you're saying, because I felt like I had to be better and stronger and always be on my game, can't make any mistakes. So I do understand that. But I know that you add a whole different level of concern as a Black woman, what you guys were just explaining, that obviously I have not had to deal with in my life. And I'm happy that you have shared that with the audience and with us. What do you feel is the answer or the solution for white people to understand better what you go through? What is the solution for that?
Well, Kathern, I was really glad that you brought up your experience as far as when you became a police officer. And I think that is a good example of what Black people go through, and Black women go through. And I would just put a whole big old layer on top of it. But what you talked about is real, and it matters, and it does happen to white women and everything. And so I really want to just really value what you said, because it's an awesome example. I'm a person that really believes in education, but I don't think education for white people is going to be easy. I've run some groups for a group of white women that really wanted to learn. And these women were like between the ages of like 65 and 85. And they came to me during the Breonna Taylor tragedy. And they said, will you teach us about some things about anti-racism and how to be anti-racist? And so they chose me because they thought that I was a person that would teach them and not get upset with them because they didn't know something. And so I did that. So a lot of people will disagree with me, and they will say it's not Black people's, place to be teaching white people. They need to learn on their own. However, I think that education is the key. I think that there needs to be opportunities and platforms for white people to see what they need. And some of it needs to be experiential. And when you go looking at what happened to enslaved Africans, when you go looking at the castration of Black men, the rape of Black women, the mutilation of babies, all that kind of stuff, that stuff is difficult to hear. However, you have to take the medicine so that you can get well. And first, there has to be an acknowledgement that something happened. Then, Black people need to be able to feel safe, and then there can be healing. But until there's safety, until people are educated, there's no way, in my opinion, that we're going to get ahead of this.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I would have been grateful to have some more background when I was younger, especially. Like you said, what I've learned now, I've learned through my friends, but and sometimes you have to ask the questions, even though they seem hard. I know sometimes I worry that, I don't want to look dumb or naive when I ask these questions, right? Because we kind of all pride ourselves on being more evolved. But I think that white people just have to be willing to ask the questions of their Black and African American friends. And Betty, the reason why I say both is because I have been told by some of my friends that they did not, their relatives, their ancestors did not come from Africa. They came from other cultures. So that's why I like to say, refer to both. But wouldn't it be great if there's a time in the future where we never had to say that, like Latino, white, Black, Hispanic, Asian? Wouldn't it be great if just all people were people and we didn't have to put a label on anybody? And you guys have this listed in your outline here. The root causes are racism, sexism, and then maybe you want to speak to that because you were heading there, Dr. Renee.
Your point about, what if, we were in a world where we didn't have to say Black or Latino. But there's kind of it's kind of a like sensitive thing. with that, because people want you to see them.
Yes, yes, you're right. You're right.
See I'm Black. They want you to see they're Latino. They
Right.
want you to see that. So it gets just a little bit of complicated, but I think that, people have to work together. And I think that education is the key. And I think that one of the worst things that's happened is that the history enslaved Africans and what happened and how this country was built has not been taught in the schools.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of shame and embarrassment, or I just don't even want to acknowledge it kind of, thing like abusers do. I'm going to act like this didn't happen. Well, people need to know. They just need to know in order to be able to make change.
Absolutely.
Influence change is my opinion.
And thank you for pointing that out. Yes.
And
thank you for pointing that out, because I understand of where they come from and what they were, their ancestry. Absolutely. Betty, I'm going to segue into this because you created this slide. So I want to segue into this section of our talk. White people can bend the rules because they made them. Until this changes, Black people will simply have to play the game. That's a really loaded statement. And I'm sure, that if we were to put this up on Twitter or social media, there'd be all kinds of people talking, right? So tell me what your point is behind, what is your message?
My message for this actually goes back to the previous slide. A lot of things were rooted in racism, and racism was just a set of rules to help demean people and to get free labor. But one of the ways that to help demean people was to, make people feel they were less than, or a piece of furniture, or Black people were counted along with the cattle. We were the chattel. And as we come out, Dr. Campbell just said, is part of the, wanting your identity. We're hyphenated Americans because if you weren't European white, your history was erased. Well, the rules came from what's the situation that's going on. A lot of people forget that a lot of white people were not accepted. The signs in the South said no coloreds, no Jews. In the North, it said the same thing. So European Americans make the rules. Society adopted them as this is what we're going to do. And we don't even understand the reason behind a lot of rules. For example, a real quick example, Ronald Reagan talked about the welfare queen, and we all know that our studies and history shows that the majority of people on welfare were not African Americans, and still aren't. However, that was not the story that was put out. And one of the things that everybody knew about was the no man rule. And the no man rule was a technique that stems almost from slavery, because Black people couldn't marry. We were not human. How could we love? How can we have family? So now you want the government to send you a check. You have all of these children. Well, there can't be a man in the house. And it helped to break up the families. That's where the no man rule came from. It really wasn't because Black women didn't have men who loved them and who wanted to be more than a sperm donor. So it's history. And a lot of times people don't want to do history. They don't even want to go back to yesterday. But our history definitely tells us who we are now, and it can inform us of who we are going to be. It's just how are we going to take it? And for Black women to stop a cycle of mental illness, to stop a cycle of any other social ills or social problems, we need to understand where we came from, and we also need to be able to acknowledge those problems. One of the stigmas is being a superwoman. Well, if you're a superwoman, you're never going to talk about what's wrong with you. If the slide that you have up, these are the names that we were called. We were Mammy, we were Jezebel, we were that strong Black woman who just, we were the angry Black woman who just did whatever. And actually, a Black woman can be all these people. But think about it. A white woman can also be all these people. She just won't get the label. And so the rules say that everything that comes out of my mouth can be dissected and looked at and see if there's a hidden meaning behind it. And the rules can also say, if somebody else says it of another persuasion, it's fine, and it's just a statement she said. And so
Dr. Renee? Dr. Renee, do you want to comment on what Betty said?
Well, yeah, there's so much, especially
I know.
I'm looking at Angela Bassett back here.
Yeah.
Blowing up that car.
The angry Black woman, yes.
Yeah. But I was thinking about, what, Betty, what you were saying and stuff about, how Black women and Black people have been dehumanized. And I was reading Miss Cicely Tyson's book, Just As I Am. And you know how famous she was and talented she was. And back in the 60s, there was a reporter that was interviewing her about a movie that she was in. And in this movie, there was a Black man that was talking about how he loved his son. And his son was talking about how he loved him. And this reporter asked her in an interview, he was like, Miss Tyson, I was just amazed that I didn't know that a black people felt that kind of love, had that kind of love for their children. So this stuff is ingrained in people. It's ingrained in it, and it's almost like you have to be deprogrammed. And Black women, I would say, Black women are human beings, and Black women feel just like everybody else. And it's just a shame that we have to even say that. Black women feel just like everybody else, But, it's true. And I think a lot of things have to be unlearned, Kathern.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you completely. You both have had just some amazing conversations together today. Thank you for letting me interject a little bit. I appreciate it so much. And we have another, a whole section that we want to talk about that has to do with mental health and all the things that Betty, focused in on and that you focused in on. So we are going to have another webcast video podcast here probably within the next 60 days. And I will make sure and let you know about it. We'll put it on our website, socialchangewarriors.org, and also on our social media feeds, because this is a whole nother subject and a whole nother topic that is very important that we talk about, because when you're under this kind of pressure and stress, like Betty and Dr. Renee explained to you that Black women are under on a daily basis, there are going to be mental health ramifications. And we really need to talk about that and discuss it. So we hope you'll join us for part 2. Betty, any last minute thoughts for today?
My thought is, and my hope is, if anyone sees this, whether whatever your race, creed, or color, if you feel that you need help, seek out a professional mental health therapist and shop around. The first one you talk to may not be the one for you.
Dr. Renee?
I would say if any of this resonates with anyone, that I would begin to study for myself. If you're a person that is white, and I think, a good place to start would probably be Miss Cicely Tyson's book, Just As I Am. Now, it's about her, but it's a lot of information in there about racism. And I think it's an experiential exercise to read that book. Or, there are many other books, but I would say begin to educate, begin to reach out and ask questions. And you got to be the change that you want to see. And you have to be brave, and it's not going to be easy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You reminded me that I was looking at the book called Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, which was published back when I was in high school in 1981. Mm-hmm. And I had read that book in college for one of my courses. And I found it at the library recently when I knew we were going to be doing this panel today. And I just want to read a little bit, a clip from this for all of you, because it was fascinating for me because I had never really thought about this before. It says that when Black people are talked about, the focus tends to be on Black men and on white women. Thus, the Black woman, by the mere fact of being routinely excluded from gender-based political initiatives that often center on the white woman and simultaneously erased from the race-based movements that frequently center on Black men. And she went on to say, and this is Jennifer Nash, she was a professor at Northwestern, that there is multiple marginalized situations going on here. But then she went on to say that this puts the Black woman in a very unique advantage because she can understand about this oppression because she's dealing with it on so many more levels and layers than anyone else is with any other oppressions that are in the world. So I really thought this was interesting. And she said poignantly, this is not a superpower. This is what surviving oppression looks like.
Yeah.
So we will continue our discussion in about a month because it's going to take us time to put it together. And we may have a couple other guests with us when we have our next session on Behind the Myth. Black Women in America. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for making it to our YouTube channel. If you have any training requests or presentations you would like us to do, please check us out on our webpage, socialchangewarriors.org. Betty, Malloy, Dr. Renee Campbell, thank you so much for all of this fantastic information today. And I hope everyone stays well, and please treat everyone with kindness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.